I'm extremely sorry. I think it's just a problem of the internet. Let me try.
Hope I get him.
Yeah, I'm
Apologies,
here.
sir. Apologies,
No,
sir.
I don't know
Apologies.
who should apologize because it's entirely possible it's my
Me. No, it's
Sarkari
me.
internet as well.
No, always the host apologizes. So I'm sorry.
You're a good host, Sunil.
Thank you. So to begin with, I have seen pictures of you at stadiums. You have never seen one of me at a literary fest.
That's
Just so
true.
we know, yeah, just so that we know who is going to be outside his comfort zone throughout the conversation. Just want to make it clear.
Listen,
And
I'm
also,
the guy
sir,
who's
yeah,
hugely awestruck to be talking to the Indian football captain, who is second in the list of world's goal scorers after Ronaldo and ahead of Messi. I mean, we're talking serious stuff here, Sunil Chhetri.
thank you.
I'm the one who's got to
Thank you
be
so much.
grateful to be with you.
Thank you so much, sir. So why? I mean, it's not about me, of course, it's about you today. Why I'm saying this is because, sir, we worked really hard on 11 on 10 series, and the hard work is about research and making sure we get 10 questions that the guest generally doesn't answer.
Okay, right.
But with you, there's an added pressure from someone called Kunal, who is in my team, who's a big fan of you. He told me, do not make grammatical errors or mistakes in sentence formation, and do not embarrass us. And I told him that I'm just a sports person and I make many mistakes, and probably I'll do that today also. But I'll before and ask for his apology. If you do hear all those mistakes, please pardon me, sir.
I'm simply won't be an issue, Sunil, because I'm not an English teacher. As long as I understand what you're after, I'll try and respond
I
satisfactorily.
told him exactly the same thing. I'll say I'll make sure at least sir understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Okay. So are you ready, sir? Should we start?
I guess. Sure.
Okay. So my first question to you, sir. I have recently taken up reading regularly.
Good.
I like it more. I like it
It's a
more
good
than what
habit.
I thought I would. Yeah, it is. And I think I saw an interview of Bill Gates where he's talking about reading habits. He talks about keeping notes in the margin, not picking up books that you know you're not going to finish, taking out 1 hour every day, dedicate it to just reading. I want to know how does Shashi Tharoor gets it reading? What is the way? What is the system? How does he go about it?
Well, there are two different kinds of reading that I end up doing, Sunil. There's
Sir,
reading purely for pleasure, where I put my, I sit back in a very comfortable chair that actually has a built-in massager in it, and I turn the button on and I vibrate along and I put my book up and I recline and I read and I forget the world. That's one kind of reading. But the other kind of reading, and I have to say in recent years, that's what I've been doing more of, is reading with a view to doing research for books I'm writing. And
okay,
there I'm reading at a desk on a laptop. In fact, very often the book itself is on my drive.
okay,
And I'm taking notes from it because I need to refer to those notes when I'm writing what I'm writing. So for a book like Era of Darkness on the British Empire here,
yeah,
published in the West as Inglorious Empire, or the current book I'm writing on Indian nationalism, which requires a lot of sources on the nationalism part. On
yeah,
India, I think I'm pretty okay. But when it comes to all the theoretical work that's been done on nationalism, there's
sir.
so much of other stuff to read, and you need
Hmm.
to quote them accurately, so you need to read and take notes. So, two kinds of reading. I would say that kind of note taking reading is certainly a more focused reading because you're trying to get something specific, extracting something from it. Whereas the
Okay.
kind of other reading I described is purely for pleasure, where you
Hmm.
just want enjoyment. You don't have to remember what you read, you just have to remember whether you liked it.
But even there, do you know what books are going to pick up, or you just randomly pick anything that is there when it comes to
Actually,
pleasure reading?
I have very eclectic tastes, Sunil. That is that I don't focus only on one kind of genre. It depends on my mood. So I do enjoy both fiction and non-fiction. In non-fiction, I'm particularly partial to history and politics, and political history in particular combines both. In fiction, again, I have a wide range of tastes between the sort of what one might consider the literary giants, a Garcia Marquez, a Salman Rushdie. When their books come out, of course, Garcia Marquez has now passed away, but books of that quality come out, then I would happy to read them. But equally enjoy light diversion. I was a huge fan of P.G. Woodhouse's. I would still consider that, but since I've read every single P.G. Woodhouse, there's no point rereading Life is Too Short. At least not until there's an emergency or something that I may have to turn back to my collection of Woodhouses. But otherwise, not long ago, in fact, over Christmas, I read a new novel written in the Woodhouse style. That is, the Woodhouse estate has licensed new writers to imitate Woodhouse in writing an additional Woodhouse novel. And that's the one that I found myself reading by a writer called Sebastian Faulks, who's a well-known British writer. So you've got that kind of thing that comes up. There's no question in my mind that pleasure is also fun. For example, there's a hilarious Swedish novel, which I recommend to everybody who wants a good laugh. And at the same time,
I'll write it down.
In the broader world. It's by Jonas Jonsson. That's with a J in both cases. Jonas Jonsson. It's called The 100-Year-Old Man Who Stepped Out of a Window and Disappeared. That's the entire title of the book. And it's hilarious. Here is this character who walks into all the main historical events of the 20th century in a zany plot involving stolen money, corpses turning up anywhere, twists and turns that are hilarious. The whole thing is brilliantly written, and I haven't had so much fun since Woodhouse died. Now, I was talking about this book, including on some of my book recommendations during the lockdown, and then a friend said, did you know there was a sequel? And I didn't. And so I received as a gift, as soon as the postal services began, I received as a gift the sequel, which is Further Accidental Adventures of the 100-Year-Old Man. So when my book that I'm writing is finished, I'm going to settle down to that and have myself some pleasure.
Lovely. So, sir, when you read so many books and get inspired by so many writers, do you sometimes feel you are influenced in your own writing also by some of the ones that you are a fan of or you love reading?
No, I've been asked that, and I find it slightly strange because, to be very honest, I think of writing as something as instinctive to the individual as the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you kick a ball. It's simply the way you are. Now, of course, you can be trained up to a point, but you can't, just as you can't train a cow to bark, you can't train somebody who doesn't have writing talent to write. And if they write, they will write in the way that they can write. So, yes, you can write imitatively. I have very deliberately and consciously, for example, published a short story in my collection, The $5 Smile, which was an attempt, and I say so in the book, to imitate Woodhouse's style in an Indian setting, just for one short story. But that doesn't mean that is my natural style. That's a very conscious imitation, just like this guy. In fact, it wasn't Sebastian Faulks, as another writer. I'm trying to remember his name now. The fellow who wrote the new Woodhouse book that came out last year. He was trying very consciously to write like Woodhouse, not like himself. And that sort of thing is what you can imitate. But if you're writing for yourself, it seems to me you have absolutely very little choice about the way you write, just as you have very little choice about the way you speak or the way you breathe or the way you swim or the way you walk. I mean, these are instinctive things that are part of who you are.
Yeah, so you can learn bits and pieces from here and there, but your style would be your style.
Exactly. That's my view anyway. It may not be the universal view among other writers, but it's certainly
but it makes sense in other parts also. Even if in sports, you can go and look up to people that play in a certain way. You can be a fan, but eventually what you play and the way you play would always be individual. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's just as your football, you've seen, I'm sure, lots of football around the world. But your football is you. It's what your body, your upbringing, your experience, your training, everything makes you do. You can't suddenly be somebody else. You have to be yourself. And the same thing applies to writers. Yes, you can admire a Garcia Marquez, but you can't be him. Therefore, you can't exactly write like him.
True. That makes sense. That's a good. All right, sir. My next question to you is, so in my sports, if I see a kid with a ball for a bit, I can probably say or tell whether he or she is cut for the sports professionally. You know, the touch, the awareness, the way they pick a pass, the desire and the hunger. But politics is no football pitch. What are the traits that determine somebody is going to be a good politician? Are there any traits that you can follow? And I'm asking you this, sir, because there is no, I don't know about any blueprint. I don't see any blueprints. So what, according to you, are the traits?
See, there are no blueprints also because there is no such thing as a standard idea of a good politician. There are so many politicians who are so different from other politicians, and they're good in their own way. So I have found in my own experience that what I admire in a good politician is somebody who, first of all, is a good listener, somebody with good people skills, somebody who can motivate staff, a team, campaigners, etc. But somebody who at the same time has some intellectual equipment to understand issues, to have a vision about those issues, to respond decisively to the problems arising from those issues, and who can communicate his understanding and the way forward to the public. Now, you could argue there are very few politicians in our country who do all of that. And certainly, you would say that Narendra Modi is a successful politician in his own way. Sharad Pawar is a successful politician. And Mamata Banerjee is a successful politician. And yet they're all so different from each other.
True.
So you can't say there is one template. I think a lot depends on individual temperament. A lot depends on your particular constituency as well. A style of politics that sells very well in Bengal may not sell very well in Bangalore. And equally, something that is effective in campaigning in Darjeeling may not be what people are looking for in Delhi. So it seems to me that also helps govern your effectiveness. Now, the other thing about politics is you've got to be a good learner. Because no one starts off, I think, being the perfect politician. I'm certainly not aware of it. Even those who were born to politics, the so-called dynasts, the people whose fathers or elder relatives had a whole history, a vote bank, their own staff of campaigners, everything else. Even those, I must say, are people who, at the beginning, were uncertain, were diffident, had to learn their way, had to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, had to correct themselves. Look at someone like Indira Gandhi. She became prime minister. Then she had a setback in an election. Then she changed her leadership style. She split her party. She became prime minister again. She declared the emergency. She lost an election. Again, she had to learn the lessons from that, come back, try again. So each time, politics, I would say, is a sustained purpose of a sustained exercise of self-renewal, of renewing yourself, of learning from your mistakes, of correcting yourself and growing with it. Certainly, without much immodesty, I can say I'm a better politician today than I was in my first year in politics, when I was in many ways like a deer in the headlights. I didn't know what was going on, why people were attacking me, why I was being sort of repeatedly stabbed in the back, as well as in the front. So I was totally mystified. And I'm sure many of those who were attacking me must have thought I was going to run away because this was not my world. But I said, no, I've stepped into it. I must make a real effort to do something here. And I have decided to take it on, stick to it, take the lumps, and bear the scars and carry on. And that's essentially what I did. As a result, I got better. So politics is certainly a profession where you do, I think, better simply by doing and learning from your setbacks.
So you get into it and then you learn and then you become better. And you gave us so many traits of being versatile, of being a good leader, of being a good listener, someone who's going to reinvent himself or herself. Where does the knowing of the constitution and the rules and regulation come up? Like what?
So as I mentioned, somebody must have the intellectual equipment to understand the issues. That starts with a basic grounding in our democracy. What is the constitution? What is our system? In the particular job that you're trying to do, whether it's a local panchayat level, municipal level, MLA or assembly level, state level, central level, parliament level, you must understand what are the roles of that level that are appropriate under the constitution. You must do your homework. read and understand the rules of the institution you belong to, the assembly, whatever the party. At the same time, you have to be somebody with a sense of some political history. You need to understand what your party stands for, has stood for, where you differ from those who are in power if you're not in power, or where you differ from those who are in the opposition if you are in power. You have to have a good sense of also why you differ, what the logic is of the positions you take. So that intellectual equipment that I mentioned includes all of this.
Okay.
And certainly I would believe that you ought to be motivated by something other than self-interest. I know there are some people in politics who are only there because they see it as a means of self-advancement. I think that's a great shame. I think if all you want is to make money or whatever, you should go into banking or or some profession where that's the purpose of the profession. Politics is ultimately about service, and particularly service to society. And every one of us in electoral politics is serving people, a majority of whom live below the World Bank poverty line of $2 a day.
True.
That's 150 rupees a day. Many Indians can't take for granted. So our entire logic of what work we're doing and the money we're spending or the money we are dedicating from taxpayer funds must be a what can I do that is needed by the vast majority of the poor in our country. Mahatma Gandhi gave us a great piece of advice. He said, when you're contemplating a policy decision, think of how it will impact who's the weakest, poorest, oldest, most fragile person you've seen. Imagine that person asks, how will it affect them? And that would be ultimately the test of the right policy, whether they're doing it or not. So, to my mind, those things have to be borne in mind. I certainly don't think that there's any real way of people to honestly make money in politics. Unfortunately, the only way people make money is dishonest. Because honestly, your salary is very modest. Even an MP or a minister, despite all the perks that the middle class objects to them getting, earns much less than they have to spend. So they actually have to supplement their official income, ideally by honest means, either through a law practice or writing articles as I do, or whatever else other businesses they may have, in order to supplement their official income to be able to make an impact. Otherwise, how do you, for example, run an office in Delhi and in your constituency, run cars in both places, pay staff in both places, have expenses in both places, electricity bills and phone bills in both places? You can't do it on the basis of pays you, which is a princely sum of 50,000 rupees a month and 50,000 in other allowances. You just can't do it.
Okay, that's
So,
a lot of
honestly,
knowledge. That's a lot of knowledge for a lot of youngsters who want to be politicians. It's just not one skill or one thing that you can have, but a lot of different stuff that you need to think that you can be a good politician.
Right.
All right. Let me jump to my third question, sir.
Sure.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but you have a little bit of London, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Massachusetts, Singapore, and more in you. It
and
also
Kerala,
meant
don't
that,
forget.
of course, I said more. Yeah, Kerala, of course, the most important one. It meant that you were growing up as a citizen of the world. It also meant, I'm sure, that you learned so much culturally. Which cities do you remember fondly? What are the cities that gave you so much as to what and who you have become today? And how do you think traveling so much helps you to become a better person?
Well, I mean, I must say that I feel, looking back, thanks to the lockdown, where I've had a very unaccustomed stability and stuck in one place for 2 months, I actually feel I've been traveling too much. I think in many ways, there's a lot to be said for being in one place and getting into the rhythms of life that other human beings enjoy. And I must say, I kind of regret the fact that I'm constantly dashing, or as we like to say in India, air dashing from place to place all the time. I think I discovered that from the 3rd of January to the 1st of February, when Parliament convened, I had been to 13 different cities for speeches, conferences, events, literary festivals, all of that. And that's really quite insane. I really, looking back, think I should not have done that. So in some ways, I think it'll teach me to slow down a bit. But answering your question, I don't have negative feelings about any place particularly. I think some places have pros and cons like other places do. So, for example, I spent the longest probably stint I spent in one city, though I was again traveling a lot, was in New York, where I was based for 18 years with the United Nations. And the pros are it's a wonderful city. It's the most cosmopolitan city on earth. Every single nationality on earth is represented there. There are languages spoken in New York that have died out in their country of origin. There are newspapers being published in New York in languages that have died in their country of origin. It's quite remarkable. And similarly, every cuisine on earth has a restaurant or several in New York. All of that's great. It's a great walking city. You can walk around from place to place and so on. On the negative side, it's an expensive city. Space is at a premium. You can only afford a tiny place to live if you're a salaried professional. You usually can't afford to maintain a car because having a garage to park your car in will be like having a second apartment. All of these things become a disincentive by comparison. So it's a better place to visit as a tourist, spend a week or two, see some plays, go to some restaurants, go to some art galleries, museums, walk around, have a great time. But if you have to try and cope with the stresses of living in New York, it's no longer such a great thing. London, I find two things objectionable about London. One is the distances are insane. It's quite common for people to take an hour and a half to get from point A to point B.
True.
And I find that utterly reprehensible and a waste of time. And the second thing is the climate. My God, they have the worst climate in the world. I began theorizing that I could understand British colonialism, that they had to go abroad and conquer places where the sun shone. Because you can't see the sun shining in London. When my sister who lives there says, "Oh, I had a good summer," I would say, "Oh, was it on a Sunday today, this year?" Because they were 1 day summer or the 2 day summer is all they get. A terrible place. So again, pros and cons. But again, it's a culturally rich place, lots of theatre, bookshops, lots of interesting activities. But rather too spread out for my taste, unlike Manhattan, New York. And so on and so forth. You can say pluses and minuses. Calcutta, for example. What a wonderfully warm city, a place of tremendous humanity, throbbing culture. It's so easy to feel embraced by the city and feel you belong. But at the same time, tremendous poverty, tremendous congestion, tremendous pollution, all of those challenges. So each place you can say good and bad about it. I would say that each of them has affected me, each of them has marked me. Today, I would tell you that the place that I feel the fondest for and the one I'm most likely to settle down in permanently would be my own constituency of Thiruvananthapuram. And I'm not saying it to ask for votes because I don't think voters will care one way or the other as long as I deliver what they expect. But I think Thiruvananthapuram has all the merits of a city, including airport, railway station, good highways, good infrastructure, including electricity and Wi-Fi, while at the same time it has some of the advantages of the rural areas that surround it, including a lot of natural beauty. The sea is nearby, beaches are nearby, forests are nearby. You can get out quickly into the countryside. You can have a breathable life as well as be in a city where nothing is too far away, traffic is relatively manageable, etc. Some of the pluses and minuses of both are available in Thiruvananthapuram, and that's why it's my favorite.
But on a whole, wouldn't you say that traveling is definitely one of the best things if one can do, to go to a different place and see the different culture, meet different people, understand their language, the way of life? Wouldn't you say that? Like I always say this in my whatever life that I've lived till now, traveling has taught me the most. When I travel to a different country, play matches there.
I see what you're saying, because you've actually been to everywhere from Kansas City to London for Queen's Park Rangers. So I'm sure that you've actually done a fair bit of traveling yourself. And I will say that there's a lot to be said for traveling. It expands your horizons. It shows you. But where I think you score and I don't is you always have a sense of home to return to. So you have a frame of reference. You grew up in a particular place, you feel rooted and anchored in a place. My problem is, when that wonderful Bengali song by D.L. Rai, Hey Deshete, Janmo Jano, Hey Deshete Mori. Hey Deshete, for me, it was London that my Janmo took place. And I certainly don't want to go and die there. So, you know, I have been too mobile. It has frustrated me, the number of things I've lost with each move from house to house, books lost, items lost, precious souvenirs lost. It's frustrated me that most of my adult life, I've never known whether I would be in that particular place I'm living in 2 or 3 years down the road, or whether the UN would transfer me somewhere, or in politics, whether my election would end in a particular way, or whatever, or whatever. There's never been that sense of stability that comes with a sense of place. So I actually have become more and more attached to the idea of having a permanent home, a permanent address, which I've never really had all my life. Even today, my main address is a Sarkari bungalow, which is there because of the generosity of the voters of Thiruvananthapuram who have elected me. If tomorrow they decide that having appointed me, it's time to disappoint me, I have to go find somewhere else to live. So that's the difference.
I understand what you mean.
Travel is great if you always have a sense of home and roots to come back to.
I understand what you're saying. And it makes sense. All right, sir. Now shifting to the next one. At 22, you were the youngest to receive a doctorate in the history of Fletcher School. Right. I think it was for international relation affairs, if I'm not wrong.
But all the doctorates are in international affairs, one aspect or the other of it. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm purely banking on the fact that you were armed with a PhD at 22 when I ask you this. If you were given a chance, what different would you do with the education system in our country? Do you think that there is a visible lack of a more holistic approach from real class 1 or class 2?
No, listen, I have to say, Sunil, that this is a vast subject. I have actually written and spoken about this so much, we could take up the rest of our hour just talking about education. That wouldn't be fair. Let me just say that there are 2 or 3 things. First of all, on the school levels, there are, I think, 2 specific things I would most emphasize. One is we should stop focusing so much on mugging up things for examinations. I think there's got to be much more emphasis on creative thinking, on original thinking, than on memorization and rote learning, particularly in the 21st century. We're living in the information age. If in the world you have to look up something, you can find it with 2 clicks of the mouse. You don't actually need to remember it word for word or fact for fact or number for number. What you do need is therefore not a well-filled mind. You need a well-formed mind. True. A mind that is able to look at unfamiliar facts and figures, understand them, come to conclusions about how to approach them, even if you haven't seen them in the examinations last year. Because life, the big exam called life, keeps asking questions you couldn't prepare for from a textbook anyway. And that's what our education system doesn't do enough to prepare our kids for. The second thing is in the way in which we teach. I keep saying to teachers when I address them, please don't teach children what to think, teach children how to think. Because that how to think is ultimately what's going to equip them in life. We are far too focused on the process of learning, not enough on the outcomes. True. So it's not about saying, have you mugged up this textbook or done this assignment or prepared this Q&A, because tomorrow some other question may come, right? It's more about how have you thought. And so those are the 2 main things about school education. On college education, I would say that the system is over-regulated and under-governed. That is that we have, for example, like UGC will tell universities everything from how many classrooms they should have, what size they should be, what should be in the syllabus, what books can be prescribed, how many years the degree should be, etc. And that's not anymore the way in which modern education systems work. In colleges, you ought to free them to offer the kind of education that they believe people need, and then the market will help decide. Students will come to places where actually they feel they're gaining something. They won't go to places where it's just pointless. Ultimately, these external details are not what should really govern a good and effective education. The effective education is what works for the student, and it will vary from student to student. So why can't you let different universities offer different things? Why should you have a one-size-fits-all regulatory approach?
Yeah,
So those are
I totally
two
agree.
big takeaways. Yeah.
And I'll tell you why I asked you this, sir, because when I was young, and in football, the more early you start, the better the chances of you becoming a professional. So a lot of kids come to me and ask that should we only play because our parents want us to study also? And I had the same problem. So when you are in class, let's say sixth, seventh, and I do understand you need basic education, but then in class seven, I only had 2 periods in the whole week to play football. There was no theory. There were no teachers coming to me and talking about football on a blackboard and teaching me what to do, what move to do. And I also think that I'm always lagging behind from someone who wants to be an engineer because he has got what, 18 classes a week for him to prosper or do well in his own career, what he wants to choose. But here I want to be a footballer. And in school, I only got 2 general PT periods where you wear white shorts and white shoes and you just go and play whatever you want. And that's all about it in a whole week. And if you want theory classes, there is none. So I was just thinking of how maybe a way where you can bring both together, where kids do not have to leave school. Then what footballers did was they left school, and that's not ideal. That's the worst thing. You should be educated. I mean, I always
But
wanted to learn more.
Sunil, in your case, your dad was a top class footballer, right? He played for the Indian Army.
They
Presumably, you
did.
got some coaching at home. I agree. You can't just do everything as add-ons after hours. So in your case, maybe it was. But you're right. I could imagine a situation where kids with genuine sporting talent, as you undoubtedly had, could be put in sports schools where the academic learning is reduced or compressed, and there is as much time given to both the theory and the practice of sports, and particularly the
True.
sport you want to play. I'm sure that there are such institutions elsewhere, and at the college level or in a post-school level, there are a few. For example, in my constituency, we have under the Sports Authority of India a national center for physical education. And that
Yeah.
center actually offers courses, including theoretical courses, in sports and train sportsmen and athletes. We have grounds for various sports and track field and everything else. But that's only after you left school, by which time you presumably either become good enough at the sport to get into a place like that, or you miss the boat
Yeah.
altogether. So you're
True.
right. We
True.
should have something like this at the school level too. I would agree with you.
All right. So now let's go to the next question. So a preconceived notion about you is big difficult words, fat books, and political campaigns. Now, if I would like you to go a little bit back and rewind time and give us a peek into Shashi Tharoor's teens. And we are not talking about the books or the paper submissions or doctorates. We would want to know, did he like any particular gig? Was he into adventure sports? Was he a little reckless sometimes? Or all your mischief was always measured? How were you as a young boy?
Not terribly reckless, I must admit. Don't ask me why. I was a bit square, I guess. But my extracurriculars were actually quite a lot. I did a lot of debating, a lot of writing, a lot of speaking and theater, acting in school and college. So I was never just
Did
a
you
class
did you
bully.
enjoy acting at those
Very
times?
much. In fact, in school in Bombay, in Campion, I'm proud to say the 3 years I competed in the interclass dramatics, as it was called, I won the Best Actor award all 3 years. Then my father got transferred to Calcutta, and I went there. We didn't have that kind of theatre in the school. We just had one play a year. It wasn't the same thing. In Bombay, I actually had theatre classes with Pearl Padamsi, the famous actress, conducting those classes. And we did public performances of plays and so on. So I really enjoyed that. If my dad hadn't got transferred and we'd stayed in Bombay, I wouldn't be surprised if I had become more serious about acting beyond the point, especially living in Bombay. But I moved on, and that was that. Speaking, particularly debating, I started very young. My father initially sort of wrote my speeches and enrolled me in debates, and I had a knack for it. I rather enjoyed it. And then as I grew up, I kept going with debating. And in Calcutta, my school, St. Xavier's, had extempore speaking, where you were given a topic and 5 minutes later you had to make a speech on it. That made you think on
Yeah.
your feet and speak well, so that also helped. and in college at St. Stephen's. I did all of those things, and I also helped revive the Woodhouse Society, named for P.G. Woodhouse, the humorist, so that we could actually do things like have mimicry competitions and practical joke competitions and that sort of stuff. Had a lot of fun with that too. So I can't say that I was totally lacking in humor, but I'm not sure I did anything totally nuts.
All right, that's well put. All right, so that's our 5 questions finished, and now I've got a small rapid fire.
Okay.
I'm sure I don't have to tell you what rapid fire means, sir. So let's be rapid and fiery.
Okay.
So are you ready?
Yep.
The first one, physical books or the Kindle?
Physical books. I love the feel, the look, the smell, the weight of a book in my hands. I like turning the pages. Physical book, way, way, way
I know the feeling now. As I said, I've just joined in.
ahead. Good.
Second one, sir, Scrabble or a crossword?
Scrabble. Crossword, it's a kind of an insider's game. You've got to get used to a particular kind of clue setting habit. So the New York Times clues are different from the London Times clues, the Times of India's clues. And once you get into the trick of the way in which those clues are set and their conventions, then it becomes an exercise in deciphering. It's like cracking a code. Whereas with Scrabble, there's much more flexibility. There's a random luck of the tiles you draw, which letters you get. There's the opportunities on the board or not. I have a 7-letter word, but I have no place to put it. And somebody else, grabs all the triples while I'm waiting for my 7-letter word, etc. So there's more variance, more ups and downs, more choices, more challenges. I prefer Scrabble.
Third one, the one book you would wrap as a gift to give to anyone?
I think probably the Mahabharata, because it just offers so much. It gives you such a rich cornucopia of stories, but not just not just the central myth that everyone knows about. The Mahabharata is full of digressions, of anecdotes, of lessons, of advice to people, and at the same time, it's very much anchored in the real world. The characters are prone to greed, to lust, to treachery, to violence, to hatred. They're motivated by the same things that people we encounter in our daily lives are motivated by. So I would say the Mahabharata is like combining mythology, history, and novel, a sort of how-to manual, everything in one book. So that's the one that offers the richest range of things for people to have.
So a 2-second break. What cornucopia means, sir? I didn't get the word.
Cornucopia is something that is absolutely full of lots of things. So it's an overflowing bounty inside one particular receptacle. See, at least after all this time, 45 minutes, I haven't used a difficult word, right?
Yeah. And so let me talk to Kunal right now. Kunal, you said sit with a dictionary, and I told you I don't need one because sir is there. So I don't need a dictionary now. All right. So the next one, a language you love to listen to, even if you don't speak or understand it.
Okay, well, a language I love to listen to that I do speak and understand is French. I just love the French language. But a language I like listening to, even when I don't always understand what's in it, is probably Bangla. I understand some, I speak some, but my Bangla is very rudimentary. But you hear poetry, you hear lyrics, you hear songs, you hear Robindra Shongit or the songs of D.L. Rai and others. It's such an incredibly melodic language, rich in resonance. My friend Shugata Bose, who was briefly an MP, now a professor again at Harvard, when you hear him speak Bangla or sing Bangla or recite a Bangla poem, you just get the majesty of the language. And I don't say that I understand even 60% of what he's saying or what other Bengali speakers and singers are saying, but I absolutely love the sound of it.
I love the language too. I'm married to a Bong girl.
I know, and I heard the story that she was your coach's daughter.
Yeah. Let's not talk about
it's like
that.
marrying the boss's daughter in the company.
Yeah, I guilty. I did that, yes. But I think she would take the blame more than half because she was the one who initiated it. So I put the blame on her.
Oh, that's the
But
husband's line. I got to speak to her to find out the other side of the story.
but I totally agree. It's a sweet language. I also do not know. I ভালো করে বাংলা বলতে পারি না, but আমি ভালো করে বুঝতে পারি. So yeah, I'm there. I can understand.
You should be ahead of me since you've got to listen to it at home, especially when she's not looking cool.
Yeah. Actually, when that happens, he speaks in Bengali only. Yeah, true. I just figured out that. Yeah. All right, sir. Our next question. PG Woodhouse. To be honest, I haven't read any of his book.
Oh, you're missing
But I know
out
that,
on
like,
life, guys.
I know, sir. I just started. I'm a rookie. I will get there. Describe the legend in one word or sentence.
Indescribable. No, I mean, the truth is that I would say he is a man who managed to reinvent English humor while at the same time doing it with a very, very inventive use of the English language. So you can really improve your English, not just language, but literature, because of all of his literary allusions in his writing. But at the same time, you have a lot of fun because he's got all these zany plots, madcap characters doing insane things, pinching policemen's helmets on boat race night, being bullied by tyrannical aunts, throwing buns at each other at their club. I mean, the whole thing is, these are these really crazy, irresponsible, wild characters doing all sorts of silly things, but written in an incredibly literate style with a tremendous sense of humor, lots of similes, metaphors, expressions. The language is used so brilliantly that I fell in love with the use of language while at the same time enjoying the humor. It's just the perfect thing. So anybody who says that I really want to read good English prose. I mean, there was a famous writer in the middle of the 20th century called Hilaire Belloc, who said the greatest living writer of the English language is P.G. Woodhouse. And people say, well, he's only a humorist. It's like saying that a thriller writer or somebody is such a great writer. But honestly, if you read him, you'll understand why.
Okay.
The music, the music of the language is unbelievable in his hands.
Duly noted. Yes. The next one, sir. Favorite sports and favorite Indian sports person.
Listen, I know the diplomatic thing to do would be to say football and Sunil Chhetri, but I'll be honest.
No. You have to be honest, sir, please.
And in football, you're one of the few people I've heard of because I don't watch football. My twin sons, who are your age, make up for it completely. They're the ones who are obsessed with football and they follow football wherever. When they come to India, they are sitting in a football ground in Kolkata. All that is typical. But when it comes to me, from my childhood, I've been what the Australians call a cricket tragic. I saw my first test match with my father at the age of 7. I was hooked from then onwards, and I have been obsessed with cricket ever since. And that included a period when I was away in countries where no cricket is played. I mean, no serious cricket is played. Posted in Geneva, in Singapore, in New York. And this was the days before the internet, when all you could do was catch the scores, 3 times a day for 1 or 2 brief minutes on BBC Sports Roundup, if you had a shortwave radio and if the reception was not interrupted by too much static. So many people in that situation just gave up their fondness for the game, saying it's impossible to follow it sitting in New York or somewhere. In my case, the keen edge of deprivation simply sharpened my interest. So I would go out of my way to find 3-month-old newspapers, read about test matches long since over. I would follow scores in other countries. I would do all of that stuff. And the result is that I've been able to keep my passion for the game throughout my adult life, really, from the age of 7. And that's my favorite sport. I wouldn't pick one favorite cricketer because I've had so many. And over the years, when you've been watching a sport for over half a century, you have lots of favorites over time in different ways for different times. If you had to ask me to pick 20 favorites, I could more easily than pick one. But there's some great players, and most of them, of course, Indian.
Yeah. So let's say the first Indian cricketer that you really loved and followed. The first one.
The first one, when I was very young, was a guy called M.L. Jaisima. He was a very, very interesting player who was attractive and swashbuckling both to look at and when playing. He would tie a handkerchief around his throat like a cravat He looked like something out of a 16th century pirate scene or something. And he would come in and wield the bat like a rapier, but he could also be very defensive and careful when needed to be. Very attractive cricketer and very attractive person. Then, of course, there was Tiger Pataudi, who lost one eye.
Yeah.
And despite that, became one of the great batsmen. He would have been far greater, of course, if he'd had both eyes, because as a schoolboy, he broke every single schoolboy cricket record. And then at the age of 20, to lose one eye and have to reinvent the way you stand, the way you play, everything, and still be a good enough player to captain your country, that was amazing. There was an off-spinner called Venkatraghavan. There was an amazing wicketkeeper batsman called Buddhi Kundaran. I remember the first match I ever saw, the first day I saw Test cricket, Buddhi Kundaran opened the batting for India against England. And he hit, in the first or second over, hit a huge six that landed practically at my feet, right in the ground in front of me. Then a few minutes later, he tried another shot like that. It landed just inside the boundary, so it was a 4. And the third time he tried a big shot, it steepled up into the air, came down, and an English fieldsman caught it while Kundaran was still running. So while running, he threw his bat up into the air. He knew he was out, continued running, caught the bat as it came down, and ran onto the pavilion. I thought, wow. It was like a dose of exhilaration being injected into my veins. And Kundaran is the one with whom I can say I really became hooked on cricket. Amazing player. He would have thrived in the T20 era.
Clearly shows how big a fan you are of cricket, sir.
Totally.
The last one is, the working title of your autobiography is?
I don't know. I mean, first of all, I haven't contemplated writing one just yet.
But you will write someday, isn't it?
Various possibilities. I suppose one would be The Man with Two Horoscopes. Because when I was born in London, my Indian parents, of course, carefully noted the time. And they asked an amateur astrologer who was a doctor in London to write a horoscope. And they also sent the details off to the village, my parents, my mother's village. And some local astrologer cast a horoscope there. And the two simply don't match. So rather than choose between them, I said, let's have both and use one. In fact, when I was getting married for the first time, and my intended parents asked for horoscope, the first one didn't match. We said, yeah, try this one. It might be more accurate. So in some ways, it's not an inappropriate metaphor for somebody who's led two lives always. I've never been just one thing. Even when I was working at the UN, I was writing on the side. When I was studying, I was writing on the side. When I was in politics, I was writing on the side. So in some ways, I've had two destinies laid out for me. One through my words, through my pen, through my voice, and one through my actions, whether in peacekeeping, in refugee work, now in political work. So, most people would say that there's a major difference between the life of an observer and the life of a doer, an actor. I would say that I've been privileged to have had a chance to do both, where you go from the world of decisions to the world of conclusions. And then you go back to the world of decisions and see if some of your conclusions make sense in the real world. So in some ways, it's been quite interesting to have those two lives. The title "Two Lives" has already been used up by Vikram Seth in one of his books. Another possibility, I suppose, if I wrote the book very soon, I'd like the title to be "To Be Continued," because I don't think I've finished yet. But
that's a good one, yeah.
But there you are.
All right. So sir, now we have 5 questions done and the rapid fire done. Can I request you for a 2-minute break? Because what happens is Instagram doesn't allow after an hour. So can I please get you back in 2 minutes if you do not mind?
Sure. So do we hang up?
Thank you so much. I'll hang up and I'll come back in just a minute and I'll add you in a minute, sir.
Okay. I'll stay on the line.
To everyone who is enjoying this chat, we'll see you back in 2 minutes. And sorry for the inconvenience to everyone.